You're tired, not the kind of tiredness that a full night of sleep can fix. It's deeper than that. It's the kind of exhaustion that sits quietly in your chest, that follows you through your day, that makes even simple things feel heavy. You wake up, you go through the motions, you try to stay focused, but your mind keeps pulling you in 100 different directions. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, you start wondering, why does everything feel so hard? Here's something most people won't tell you. It's not that life is harder for you. It's that your mind has been trained, slowly and unconsciously, to work against you instead of for you. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote that your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought, and if your habits are weak, scattered, and reactive, your mind will reflect that. If you're someone who genuinely wants to build a stronger mind, not just for success, but for peace, clarity, and control, then this is your space. Consider subscribing, not as a favor to me, but as a commitment to yourself, a quiet decision to step away from distraction and move toward discipline, awareness, and a life guided by intention. Habit 1. The eradication of morning negotiation. The first real test of your discipline doesn't happen at work or in your relationships or in big life decisions. It happens in a quiet, almost invisible moment when your alarm goes off in the morning and your body feels heavy, your mind feels foggy, and a soft voice inside you starts whispering excuses. It tells you that you deserve more rest, that one delay won't matter, that you can start tomorrow. And the dangerous part is that this voice doesn't sound weak. It sounds reasonable, it sounds comforting, it sounds like it cares about you. But in reality, it is slowly training you to betray yourself. Every time you hit snooze, you are not just delaying your morning, you are reinforcing a pattern. You are teaching your mind that your commitments are flexible, that your discipline is optional, and that comfort comes before purpose. And when this pattern repeats day after day, it doesn't stay limited to your mornings. It spreads into every area of your life. You start delaying difficult tasks. You start avoiding responsibility. You start choosing what feels easy instead of what builds you. Epictetus made it very clear that self-mastery is the foundation of freedom, and this is where it begins. Not in grand gestures, not in big decisions, but in small, consistent actions that prove to yourself that you are in control. When you wake up and immediately act, without negotiation, without hesitation, you are sending a powerful message to your mind. You are telling it that you are the one in charge, not your emotions, not your impulses, not your temporary discomfort. Think about it this way. If you cannot control the first decision of your day, how can you expect to control the bigger ones? If you allow yourself to start the day with weakness, you carry that energy forward. But if you start with discipline, even when it feels uncomfortable, you create momentum, you create confidence, you create a sense of internal authority that carries into everything else you do. This doesn't mean it suddenly becomes easy. It doesn't. There will still be mornings where you feel tired, where your body resists, where your mind tries to negotiate. But the difference is that you stop listening. You don't give that voice power, you act anyway. And over time, that voice becomes quieter. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer controls you. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning that he was rising to do the work of a human being, not to stay comfortable, not to indulge in ease, but to fulfill his role with discipline and purpose. And when you adopt that mindset, mornings stop being a struggle and start becoming a declaration. A declaration that you are not here to drift through life. You are here to lead it. Habit 2. The absolute protection of morning focus. The moment you wake up, your mind is at its most sensitive state. It is open, impressionable, and highly receptive to whatever you feed it. And yet, most people unknowingly sabotage this moment every single day. Before they even fully wake up, they reach for their phone. They scroll through messages, notifications, social media, news, and within minutes their mind is flooded with information that has nothing to do with their own life. What seems like a small habit is actually a powerful form of surrender. You are allowing the outside world to dictate your internal state before you even have a chance to think for yourself. You are trading clarity for noise, intention for reaction, and control for distraction. And once your mind enters that reactive state, it becomes much harder to regain focus throughout the day. The Stoics placed a high value on guarding the mind. They understood that what you allow into your awareness shapes your thinking, and your thinking shapes your actions. When you start your day with distraction, your thoughts become scattered. When you start your day with intention, your thoughts become structured. Imagine waking up and instead of reaching for your phone, you sit in silence for a few minutes. You allow your mind to settle. You think about what truly matters. You plan your day with clarity instead of urgency. That simple shift creates a completely different internal environment. You are no longer reacting to life. You are preparing to lead it. Carl Jung spoke about the importance of inner awareness, emphasizing that the more you become conscious of your internal world, the less you are controlled by external influences. This is exactly what happens when you protect your morning focus. You create space between yourself and the chaos of the world. You develop a sense of independence in your thinking. This does not mean you avoid the world entirely. It means you choose when and how you engage with it. You decide that the first hour of your day belongs to you, not to notifications, not to algorithms, not to other people's opinions, but to your own thoughts, your own direction, your own clarity. And when you consistently protect that space, something powerful happens. Your mind becomes sharper, your focus becomes stronger, and your ability to move through the day with intention increases. You are no longer being pulled in every direction. You are moving forward with purpose. Habit 3. The weaponization of the pause. There is a moment in every difficult situation that most people completely miss, and that moment is the space between what happens and how you respond to it. It is small, almost invisible, and it passes quickly, but it is one of the most powerful points of control you will ever have. The problem is that most people never learn to see it because they are too used to reacting instantly. Something happens and they respond without thinking. Someone says something and they snap back. A problem appears and they panic. An inconvenience arises and they become frustrated. This pattern feels natural because it is common, but it is also the reason why so many people feel like they are constantly being controlled by their circumstances. When you react without awareness, you are giving your power away. You are allowing external events to dictate your internal state, and over time, this creates a sense of instability. Your emotions go up and down depending on what happens around you, and you begin to feel like you have no control over your own mind. The Stoics understood that control does not come from changing the world, but from mastering your response to it. Epictetus taught that it is not events themselves that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. And that interpretation happens in that small space between stimulus and response. If you can learn to pause in that space, even for a few seconds, you can completely change the outcome of a situation. Viktor Frankl, a psychologist deeply influenced by Stoic philosophy, captured this idea perfectly when he said that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose. That statement is not just philosophical, it is practical. It means that no matter what happens to you, there is always a moment where you can decide how to respond, and that decision defines your strength. Imagine a situation where someone disrespects you. The immediate reaction might be anger. You feel it rising, your heart rate increases, your mind starts forming a response. Most people act in that moment. They react. But if you pause, if you take a breath, if you allow that emotional surge to pass before you speak, you create a different outcome. You respond with clarity instead of impulse. You maintain control instead of losing it. This habit is not about suppressing your emotions. It is about managing them. It is about recognizing that your first reaction is not always your best response. When you build the habit of pausing, you give yourself time to think, time to choose, time to act in alignment with your values instead of your impulses. At first, this will feel difficult. Your mind is used to reacting quickly. It is used to following emotional patterns. But with practice, the pause becomes stronger. It becomes more natural. And over time, you begin to notice that situations that once triggered you no longer have the same power. You become calmer, more controlled, more deliberate, and that is what separates a strong mind from a reactive one. Habit 4. The deliberate injection of discomfort. There is a quiet trap that most people fall into without realizing it, and that trap is comfort. It feels harmless. It feels deserved. After all, who doesn't want an easier life? But what most people fail to see is that constant comfort comes with a hidden cost. It weakens your ability to handle stress. It reduces your tolerance for difficulty, and over time it makes even small challenges feel overwhelming. When your life is built around avoiding discomfort, your mind never learns how to deal with it. You become fragile without realizing it. You expect things to go smoothly, and when they don't, you struggle. You become frustrated, anxious, and easily overwhelmed, not because the situation is unbearable, but because your mind has not been trained to endure. The Stoics approached this differently. They did not wait for life to challenge them. They challenged themselves. Seneca practiced voluntary discomfort, exposing himself to hardship on purpose so that he would not be shaken when real difficulties appeared. This was not about suffering for the sake of suffering. It was about building resilience. When you choose discomfort intentionally, you are training your mind. You are teaching it that difficulty is not something to fear, but something to handle. This can be done in simple ways. Taking a cold shower when you would rather stay warm, exercising when you feel tired, choosing discipline over instant gratification, having difficult conversations instead of avoiding them. Each of these actions may seem small, but they have a powerful effect. They build mental strength, they increase your tolerance for stress, and they create a sense of confidence that comes from knowing that you can handle discomfort. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Part of that acceptance is recognizing your tendency to avoid discomfort and choosing to face it anyway. It is about understanding that growth does not happen in comfort. It happens in resistance. When you begin to introduce discomfort into your life on your own terms, something shifts. You stop fearing challenges. You start embracing them. You begin to see difficulty not as something that is happening to you, but as something that is shaping you. And over time, this changes the way you experience life. Situations that once felt overwhelming become manageable. Problems that once felt heavy become lighter. Not because life has become easier, but because you have become stronger. Habit 5. The silent execution of duty. In a world where everything is shared, announced, and displayed, there is a strong temptation to talk about what you are going to do before you actually do it. People share their goals, their plans, their intentions, often seeking validation before any real work has been completed. And while this may feel motivating in the moment, it creates a subtle problem. When you talk about your goals, your brain releases a sense of reward. It gives you a feeling of progress, even though no real progress has been made. This reduces your drive to actually follow through, because part of you already feels like you have achieved something. The Stoics valued action over words. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." This principle is simple but powerful. It means that your focus should not be on talking about your intentions, but on living them. Strong minds operate quietly. They do not feel the need to announce their plans. They focus on execution. They do the work consistently, without seeking attention or approval. And when results come, they speak for themselves. This habit protects your energy. When you stop explaining yourself, you free up mental space. You become less distracted by other people's opinions. You become more focused on your own actions. And this creates a deeper form of motivation, one that is not dependent on external validation. Imagine working toward your goals without telling anyone. Imagine putting in effort every day, improving quietly, without needing recognition. That kind of focus builds something powerful. It builds discipline. It builds confidence. It builds a sense of self-respect that comes from knowing that you are doing what you said you would do. This does not mean you isolate yourself completely. It means you shift your priority. You stop seeking validation and start seeking progress. You let your actions define you, not your words. And over time, people will notice, not because you told them, but because your results will make it impossible to ignore. Habit 6. The amputation of complaining. There is a habit so common that most people don't even recognize it as a problem, and that habit is complaining. It shows up in small ways, in casual conversations, in internal thoughts, in reactions to inconvenience. You complain about the weather, about traffic, about people, about things not going your way. And it feels harmless, almost natural, because everyone around you does the same thing. But what you don't see is the deeper effect it has on your mind. Every time you complain, you are reinforcing a mindset of powerlessness. You are focusing your attention on what is wrong instead of what can be done. You are training your brain to look for problems instead of solutions. And over time, this becomes your default way of thinking. You start to believe that life is happening to you rather than something you can actively respond to. The Stoics had a very clear perspective on this. They divided life into two categories: what you can control and what you cannot. If something is within your control, then complaining is unnecessary because you have the ability to act. If something is outside your control, then complaining is useless because it changes nothing. Epictetus emphasized this idea repeatedly, reminding himself and others that peace comes from focusing only on what is within your power. When you adopt this mindset, complaining begins to lose its place in your life. This does not mean you ignore difficulties or pretend that challenges do not exist. It means you respond differently. Instead of saying, "This is unfair," you ask, "What can I do about this?" Instead of focusing on frustration, you focus on action or acceptance. At first, this requires awareness. You have to catch yourself in the act of complaining. You have to notice the words you use, the thoughts you repeat, the patterns you fall into. And then you have to interrupt them. You have to choose a different response. Over time, this becomes easier. Your mind begins to shift. You stop wasting energy on frustration, and you start directing that energy toward solutions. You become more focused, more effective, and more in control. Carl Jung once observed that what you resist persists. When you constantly resist reality through complaint, you create more internal tension. But when you accept what is and act where you can, that tension begins to dissolve. And this is where real strength begins to show, not in avoiding problems, but in facing them without unnecessary resistance, not in pretending everything is perfect, but in responding to imperfection with clarity and control. Habit 7. The rejection of the spectator identity. There is a silent habit that is slowly draining the potential of millions of people, and that habit is passive consumption. It is the act of watching life instead of living it. It happens when you spend hours scrolling through content, watching other people succeed, comparing yourself to lives that are carefully curated and filtered. At first, it feels harmless. You tell yourself you are relaxing, that you are just taking a break. But over time, this habit begins to shape your identity. You become more comfortable observing than acting. You start to feel like a spectator in your own life. The Stoics believed that human beings are meant to engage with life, not simply observe it. There is something within you that is designed to create, to contribute, to take action. And when you ignore that part of yourself, you begin to feel a sense of emptiness, even if you cannot fully explain it. The problem with constant consumption is that it gives you the illusion of progress without any real movement. You watch others achieve, and it feels like you are part of that experience, but in reality, you are standing still. Strong minds break this pattern. They recognize when they are slipping into passive behavior, and they interrupt it. Instead of scrolling, they create. Instead of watching, they act. Even in small ways, they choose participation over observation. This shift does not require dramatic changes. It starts with small decisions. Picking up a book instead of your phone, writing something instead of scrolling, learning a skill instead of consuming content. These actions may seem simple, but they have a powerful effect over time. Carl Jung spoke about the importance of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. That process cannot happen if you are constantly distracted by the lives of others. It requires focus, it requires action, it requires engagement with your own path. When you begin to reject the spectator mindset, something changes. You feel more present, more involved, more connected to your own life. You stop comparing yourself as much because you are too busy building something of your own. And over time, this creates a sense of purpose that cannot be found through passive consumption. It comes from action. It comes from creation. It comes from stepping into your own life instead of watching it from the outside. Habit 8. The daily release of the past. There is a weight that many people carry without realizing it, and that weight is the past. It shows up as regret, as resentment, as unresolved emotions that linger in the background of your mind. You replay situations. You think about what you should have done differently. You hold on to things that hurt you, even if they happened years ago. This habit is exhausting. Every time you bring the past into the present, you divide your energy. You are no longer fully here. Part of your attention is stuck in something that cannot be changed. And this makes it harder to move forward, harder to focus, harder to grow. The Stoics understood that the past is beyond your control. It is done. It cannot be rewritten. And yet, many people continue to carry it as if holding on to it will somehow change it. Seneca observed that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. This is especially true when it comes to the past. The pain you feel is often not from the event itself, but from the way you keep revisiting it. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean pretending that nothing happened. It means choosing not to carry unnecessary weight. It means recognizing that your future requires your full energy, not a divided one. Carl Jung expressed this idea clearly when he said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." That statement shifts your focus from the past to the present. It reminds you that your identity is not fixed by what has happened, but shaped by what you choose to do next. This habit requires practice. It requires awareness. When you catch yourself holding on to something from the past, you have to consciously release it. You have to remind yourself that it no longer serves you, that your energy is better used in the present. Over time, this creates a sense of lightness. You feel less burdened, more focused, more free, and this freedom allows you to move forward with clarity and intention. Habit 9. The ruthless audit of your circle. Whether you realize it or not, the people around you are shaping your mind. Their attitudes, their habits, their standards slowly influence your own. You may think you are independent, that you are unaffected by your environment, but the truth is that influence happens subtly over time. If you are surrounded by people who complain, you begin to complain more. If you are around people who settle, you start to lower your standards. If your environment is filled with distraction and negativity, it becomes much harder to maintain focus and discipline. The Stoics understood the importance of association. Epictetus advised to spend time with people who improve you, who challenge you, who raise your level of thinking. Because the people you engage with regularly become part of your mental environment. This does not mean you judge others harshly or cut people off without reason. It means you become aware. You observe how certain interactions make you feel. Do they leave you energized or drained, focused or distracted, motivated or discouraged? Once you see this clearly, you can make better choices. You can begin to limit your exposure to negativity. You can create space for growth. And if you cannot find the right environment physically, you can build it mentally through books, ideas, and learning. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of surrounding yourself with influences that align with your growth. Because the more you expose yourself to higher standards, the more your own standards rise. Over time, this habit changes your trajectory. You begin to think differently, act differently, aim higher, not because someone forced you, but because your environment supports it. Habit 10. The daily confrontation with mortality. There is one truth that most people avoid thinking about, and the truth is that time is limited. It is uncomfortable. It feels heavy. So people push it aside. They act as if there is always more time, more chances, more opportunities. But this illusion is one of the biggest reasons people delay their lives. They postpone their goals. They avoid difficult decisions. They wait for the perfect moment that never comes. And in doing so, they waste the most valuable resource they have. The Stoics practiced something called memento mori, which means remembering that you will die. Not in a negative way, but in a clarifying way. It forces you to see what truly matters. It removes distractions. It creates urgency. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself regularly that life is short and that every day should be lived with intention. This awareness changes your priorities. It pushes you to act instead of delay. When you reflect on your mortality, you begin to ask better questions. Are you living in alignment with your values? Are you spending your time on what truly matters? Are you becoming the person you want to be? This habit is not about fear. It is about clarity. It is about understanding that your time is not infinite and that every moment matters. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that process requires time, and time is not guaranteed. When you truly accept this, you stop wasting it. You start acting with purpose. You begin to live with urgency, not panic, but intention. And that is where everything changes. There comes a moment in life when you stop waiting for things to change and realize that nothing outside of you is going to save you. Not more time, not better circumstances, not even another burst of motivation. It's the quiet, repeated decisions you make every single day that shape who you become. And if you've stayed with me until this point, then you already understand something most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Your life begins to change the moment your habits begin to change. This is where it starts, not in some perfect future, not when you feel ready, but right here, in this moment, one decision at a time, one habit at a time. Because a strong mind is not something you hope for. It's something you build deliberately and consistently. If this message is connected with you, don't stop here. Go deeper. Watch the next video on your screen, because that's where you continue shaping the version of yourself you know you're capable of becoming. And truly, thank you for being here, for showing up, and for being part of Psychresto Mind.